Hello everyone! Today I'm gonna be featuring the German Tier 9 destroyer Felix Schultz. I'm basically skipping over the Merker entirely because I tried the Merker and it plays exactly as the Z31. It's just a complete garbage ship. Entirely forgettable ship. This is tier 10 game, playing solo on EU of course. I dumped that incredibly absurd amount of doubloons on getting these ships. I really don't like this new method of getting ships that Wargaming are going for, where basically they're in early access for months and the only way to play them is dumping a bunch of doubloons. I understand why they do it, they love money, but obviously I played the game in the olden days when a new line meant they released a new line for you to grind and people would play low tiers and level up their new ships, and basically it was a pretty different gaming experience back then, and not the please buy loot crates and gamble and hope you get your ship kind of thing. Regardless, I'm rambling. The Schultz is, to put it simply, it's not a destroyer. It might be in the destroyer slot, but this thing most certainly is not a destroyer. Let's start off with the simple. The health pool. I am running the HP perk, so that does give me 27.4k health. And of course this thing also has the armor scheme of these Germans, where it has this 25mm plate in the center and a part of the deck armor is 25mm. This does to some extent mitigate the HE damage other DDs do to you. I say to some extent because there's a lot of superstructure that's 13mm and your huge nose and stern are both 19mm, so to what extent this really mitigates can be debated. Of course, if DDs load AP, they also do a lot of damage, and the downside is that, well, you can probably see that this DD is absolutely gigantic, so it's stupidly easy to hit, so there's a fair few trade-offs. Also the fact that this 25mm plating and this thicker hull means that ships that have fast, short fuse times on their AP, for example these new Soviet heavy cruisers, well, all of them can arm their AP on your hull. I've had a Riga shoot my Schultz and get about 7,000–8,000 AP damage just using his front guns, because the hull was so thick that it fully armed the entire AP salvo and it basically chunked me out. So some upsides and downsides to the armor that this thing has. No heal, no speed boost. It does have defensive AA, but considering your AA values are so horrendously anemic, this honestly doesn't do much. They were extremely allergic of giving this ship a Hydro because obviously they don't want these things to be useful at all to the team. To put it very politely, these ships are not decided to go anywhere near the objective. Even if you build full stealth, you can only reach 6.5 km conceal, but on this huge ship, 6.5 concealment is nowhere near enough. Keep in mind they also made the smoke firing penalty 3.5 kilometers, which for a DD is gigantic, so you can't really smoke fire anywhere near objectives either. And the turning circle on the ship is a huge 800 meters. The ship does 38.3 knots and it has a 5.3 second rudder shift. Basically, it handles like absolute trash. The air detectability, even with a full build, is 3.5. With the build I'm running, it's 4 kilometers. The TLDR is Wargaming have gone out of their way to make sure you do not push these DDs anywhere near a camp. Because if you do, you're gonna get radared, you're gonna get torpedoed, because, well, the firing angles aren't really good enough, so you have to give a lot of broadside, and with no Hydro and the poor handling, you're basically prone to eat a bunch of torpedoes. Even if you even manage to get close to the cap, which is debatable because of the slow speed and the poor concealment, both air and surface. Besides that, they clearly don't want you to do anything to enemy DDs. This thing is complete trash against enemy DDs. The HE DPM is completely hilariously anemic. The base HE DPM is 78.5k. As a comparison, the Shiratsuyu has 86k HE DPM. So you will straight up be outgunned by a Shiratsuyu. You do basically nothing to enemy DDs. And the AP, well, it doesn't really arm on DDs unless they angle. They have to give you a fair bit. Basically, they have to give you this perfect amount of angle where If they're full broadside, you get overpen. If they angle too much, you bounce. So they basically have to be slightly angled perfectly for your AP to work. And even then, it's incredibly iffy. I find myself mostly loading HE against DDs, but you don't do anything to DDs. The TLDR is you have nothing to do against enemy DDs. Basically, all of them will outgun you and dumpster you easily. Ironically, one of the few DDs that you actually do well against is an enemy Schultz, because he has to give a lot of broadside, and he has a thick hull, and he has that armor that arms your AP, so you actually get a lot of full pens on enemy Schultzes. So that's that's basically it. The AP is kind of the bread and butter, the whole point of this line. The AP pen isn't really, there's the overpens I talked about, Friesen was giving too much broadside, so I got overpens, and now he angled, so I got bounces, and now I'm hoping he's gonna give me broadside again, so I maybe can get some pens. We got one pen, whoa. That's how it goes against enemy DDs. The AP, the DPM isn't exactly impressive either. The base DPM is 170k. That's, I mean, it's not quite the lowest of the AP DPM at tier 9, but it's nothing really amazing either. Like Jutland has 180, but it is quite useful. Not against DDs, but because you do have Des Moines improved pen angles, and you do have good shell travel time, and when you build AFT, you do have quite a nice range on it. So, and of course you have that special improved dispersion. So, the one thing that this ship can do, and that's farm AP damage. It's actually pretty okay at it. In fact, it's quite comfortable to play in this role. The problem is, of course, that the impact on the outcome of the game you have is very minimal. If your DDs start losing, well, you're not going to be able to stop the enemy DDs. They outspot you and they outgun you, and the torpedoes are still they're still these horrendously sad 50-knot things that crawl along the ocean floor and take an absolute age, the ocean surface, and take an absolute age to reach the enemy. Mostly I just throw them out on cooldown and hope I will randomly get some hits on something, not really having any sort of high expectations when it comes to scoring hits. So in terms of game impact, you do one thing and one thing alone, and that is you sit in the back and you farm a lot of AP damage. That's basically it. There's not a whole lot else going on with this Schultz. The AP pen is, I'd say, decent. I would have hoped it actually to be a bit better than it was. You have roughly 170-ish pen at 10 kilometers. It's enough to Citadel cruisers that give you a lot of broadside, but the second they angle, you kind of tend to struggle in multiple ways, mostly because if they decide to push you, you don't have really a whole lot of tools to stopping them from pushing you. Like, this is... the tools available to you are extremely limited. But you can farm. You can farm, and if you find yourself in positions like this where they don't really shoot me too much, and at this point I'm smoking up and reversing into the smoke, you can farm a fair bit. You can target the superstructure specifically, you can target the upper belt, you can target balance turn, basically weak points. Not go for citadels, but generally just farm some damage. And of course, if you have Gunther Luthians, he does help you with that damage output quite significantly. I found these ships quite fun to play, actually. I found them very relaxing. I played them mostly in a division because I found that playing these solo is, well, it's so hit and miss if you actually have any impact on the outcome. Your team might just get rolled or your team might win. Ultimately, you're still going to be doing the exact same thing, and that is trying to farm AP damage on whatever. Playing this solo, though, what I came to the conclusion was that while I quite enjoyed playing these, I've not quite enjoyed. I'd say that they were quite relaxing to play and to farm with. I'd hate to actually have this on my team. I'd actually hate to have the ship as my teammate, because this thing basically takes up a DD slot with a ship that doesn't have any utility. DDs are one of the strongest utility ships in the game, and this thing doesn't bring any utility. It doesn't bring cruiser utility in the terms of hydro or radar or AA power. It doesn't bring DD utility in the sense of spotting or whatever. It really doesn't do any capping or anything like that, or it counter DD play. It really doesn't do any of these. Oh, Smolensk, of course, doesn't understand what angling is. He's giving me a lot of broadside. A lot of broadside, absolutely zero reaction, so I'm just farming. If this was a Russian, if this was on the Russian server, people would tell me this is because it's the Russian server. But now that it's on the EU server, I'm sure people will explain away how this is a totally different gameplay than on the Russian server. Because on EU, everyone angles and plays better, clearly. Trying to get the kill, scoring a bunch of citadels, but the damage just doesn't seem to be quite enough. And surprisingly, I can't get the kill. Even more citadels, and somehow he is still alive. And at this point, I kind of have to give this up because there might be a lot of incoming shells, and I still can't get that kill I was hoping for. Anyway, what I was talking about, this thing doesn't bring anything to the team in terms of utility. You don't bring zoning power. I mean, it's very easy to bully this thing out of position. You don't bring cap control. You don't bring radar, hydro, anything. You're kind of just a dude who does his own thing, sits in the back and farms a bit of AP damage. It's pretty relaxing. It's a pretty chill playstyle. But it's kind of like getting a Kaba as your only DD. Like the enemy gets a Benham, or well, let's say the enemy gets a Summers or whatever, and you get a Kaba. And the enemy DD sails around capping all the objectives and torping all your ships and spotting everyone, and your Kaba kind of sails around in the back farming damage. He's probably having a good time, but no one else is really enjoying themselves. That's kind of how it goes. The only problem with the Schultz is, of course, that the Kaba, if he happens to catch the enemy DD, he can actually dumpster him, whereas if Schultz happens to catch the enemy DD will probably kill him, because he has neither firepower nor torpedo power. It's a weird line. It's a weird line. Ilbing does apparently have a bit better pen. I mentioned that I didn't find the pen that impressive. The pen is basically, it's worse than York, it's worse than Hipper, it's better than Nürnberg, it's kind of in between them. And the amazing Elbing apparently has pen that's closer to Hipper. Once again, not exactly really that amazing being closer to Hipper pen at tier 10, if that's supposed to be the selling point, but it is supposed to be better. A DD smoked up the ZF6. I think he popped his reload booster, so I'm just smoking up and trying to farm this Georgia, seeing if I can pick up this kill. Reversing away, I want nothing to do with this fight, because once again, ships like ZF6, which is actually a good ship and very multi-purpose ship that can farm multiple different targets, he will absolutely dumpster me quite easily in a 1 versus 1. So, torps coming in. Luckily, I was already turning away, because this thing does not handle nor dodge well. Hoping to catch him out. Seattle radar, so he's clearly not here. The Shimakaze spotting him. Oh, and there he is. Turret traverse. Oh, that's another thing. The turret traverse is also very slow. Basically, they don't really want these things to do anything against enemy DDs. That's the TLDR. They are very one-dimensional. To put it simply, these are extremely one-dimensional. I'm not really sure what else there's to say about these things. The AA values are trash, concealment is trash, maneuverability is trash, the damage output, I wouldn't say it's trash, it's just extremely situational and it's quite limited to what type of ship you can deal damage to. Fun ship to play? I just hope it's never gonna be on my team. I just hope it's never gonna be on my team. In fact, a division mate I played with, he said he's been playing it a lot as well, and he says it's fun as long as you have a DD spotting for you. And that's kind of the same conclusion I came to. I thought this ship was quite fun as long as there's a DD. Basically, this DD is fun as long as there's another DD who's fulfilling the DD role near you. If that guy doesn't exist and you're forced to fulfill the DD role yourself, the ship is absolute trash. If you're forced in any way to fulfill any sort of roles that the DD has to fulfill, the ship is complete garbage. But if you get to left click a bunch of broadsides, man, it's a pretty enjoyable experience. You can pump out, like in terms of consistency, the dispersion and the playstyle allows you to put out pretty consistent numbers across the board, but I just think this is such a silly idea. I don't know why they gave it defensive AA. They could have at least given it a 3-kilometer hydro, because the defensive AA does nothing, because your AA is such complete trash. I'm comparing the size. You see the Z46 next to this ship? That's a tier 9 normal German destroyer compared to my Schultz. This thing isn't a destroyer. If they at least had given it a 3 km Hydra, like it's not like you can use a 3 km Hydra offensively in this thing. You got a 3.5 km smoke fire penalty, so you wouldn't be able to do anything offensive with it. But at least that 3 km Hydra would allow you to play positionally a bit more aggressive, which means you could actually contest some caps and you could maybe smoke up in positions where you could create crossfires that other ships can't. But the tool set and everything about the ship just screams limitations. Limitations left, right, and center. The game ends. It ends up in a 190,000 damage game. I did get 2 torpedo hits, which doesn't really happen too often in the Schultz, and I do get Confederate 8 citadels. I think pretty much all of them were on the small ends. Ku insisted on giving me the flattest broadside, but I still couldn't get the kill. Surprisingly, I got a cap, not something you're gonna get too often, well, unless your teammates basically kill the enemy DD so that you can go in and secure the objective. Team score wise, 2.8k base. It was a tier 10 carrier game. I'm not really sure what both the carriers were doing. They were kind of on their own adventures, both of them. Detailed report wise, I shot very little HE. I actually find myself shooting more HE these days, mostly because I found the AP against DDs to be such horrendous trash that I found myself shoot more HE, mostly because you do get more module breaks and you do get the occasional fire, which keeps them lit and helps your team and so forth. So these days I only really shoot AP on the very, very thick destroyers. Mostly German. New destroyers. I mean, I guess Kava works. It's a weird ship, and it's a chill ship to play, but good lord, don't expect this thing to be carrying games for you if it's being played solo. This is probably the single most team-reliant destroyer I have ever played. And when I call it destroyer, I call it destroyer in the same way I call Petropavlovsk a cruiser. Depends on how you look at it. Let me show you guys my recommended build. Right, so starting off, equipment, turret, survival, and torpedo survival, I guess. Additional tankiness, because, well, you can't run improved speed boost nor improved hydro because you have neither. I do run faster turret traverse, mostly because the torpedo speed is meaningless because your torpedoes are so damn slow, and a better dispersion. Honestly, you already have such good dispersion that a small percentage based bonus on it is not really that noticeable, whereas helping your slow turret traverse does help quite a bit. Acceleration mod, because this thing moves like a barge. Concealment, because it has the concealment of a barge. And faster reload, because, well, that's what you want to be doing, ducking all day long. Captain wise, if you have Lutyens, he's obviously top tier pick. You start with preventive maintenance, you build last stand, survivability expert, and then you build into AFT, or, well, main battery and AA expert as it's called these days. Follow it up with adrenaline rush. I'm full gun build, so I run Fearless Brawler as well as BFT, or Main Battery and AA Specialist as they call it. The full idea here is because, well, the only thing that's worth anything on the ship is the guns, so the build is fully focused on making those guns better. The last point goes into faster turret traverse, because with both these modules you get the turret traverse down to 18. With running the module and the captain perk you get it down to 18.7. Not exactly amazing for a destroyer, but it's better than it would be normally. In which order? I'd say a Fearless Brawler actually gives you the smallest benefit, because you spend the most of the time hiding behind smokes, behind islands and such things, because this thing kind of sucks at open water gunboating if someone is shooting at you. There are situations like the last game where you just get to open water shoot and no one is interested in shooting at you because they don't really consider you that big a threat, or they just simply think they can't hit you. Once people figure out that this thing is in fact very, very easy to hit, that's probably going to become a lot less enjoyable. Flag wise, you run every gun flag, detonation, speed, faster consumables. Run the AA flag. Once again, you don't expect much from the AA. At this point, with AFT and the flag though, you do a lot of flak damage, so I'm kind of just hoping that someone is dumb enough to fly into the flak, and in that way, with sector reinforcement and defensive AA, the flak does hit quite hard, but obviously, if you eat one of the 3 flak puffs, that's not because your AA was good, but because the carrier was a potato. Overall, I'm not particularly impressed by these. Was it Felix Schultz? I might have called it Felix Schultz. I'm not sure. I'm not really that impressed by these things. Apparently, the Elbing is supposed to have a bit better DPM and better penetration, but this is gonna fulfill the exact same role, which is honestly not really much of a role. It's gonna be a really useless teammate that hopefully does enough damage that it will become useful. Debatable to say the least. I feel like they could have easily given this line a bit more flexibility instead of bottlenecking it into this very static role, but Wargaming does what Wargaming wants, and now we have this kind of abomination of a line. At least Schultz is enjoyable to play. I will give it that. Schultz is a pretty relaxing ship to play. Z31 is a complete disaster. Merker is absolute trash as well, so they want you to free XP again. Kind of how they tend to do the lines these days. Look at Kansas, Minnesota, Vermont. Kansas and Minnesota are both complete trash cans. Vermont has pretty insane guns. The question is, of course, are you going to give them the money that they want? That choice I leave up to you guys. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for watching.